Welcome to Africa Answers, a series featuring young African leaders unpacking topical issues affecting Africa and proposing solutions to the challenges. I am Silindile Mlilo, your host. In this episode, I'll be speaking to Dr. Benard William Chitunga, a developmental scientist.
Thank you.
Welcome, Benard.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure all mine.
Awesome. Today we'll be unpacking multilateralism in Africa, right? To get right into it, for those who don't understand the space, what is multilateralism?
Thank you, Silindile, for having me. The world is complex, and it's about many people, many countries, many institutions, many caucuses coming together to achieve common good for humanity. So multilateralism is that stakeholders on an issue coming on platforms that can help them to push an agenda and to achieve something that will better move humanity forward. And so multilateralism in Africa is that Africa countries, Africa leaders, Africa institutions, and the world at large looking at what's affecting Africa and what they can do together to ensure that our beautiful continent continues to grow and people actualize a good quality of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone then would ask, does multilateralism work for Africa? And if so, how?
Yeah, so Africa as a continent has gone through various stages and important activities, you know, from the time of slavery and then colonialism and then an independent Africa where the continent had attained its independence and the new leadership. And it came a time now Africa started to actualize its development agenda, whether it was through agrarian revolution or some African countries attaining their industrialization. And when we came to the millennium age, you know, the millennium development goals, and then now we are in the SDG age. And so these are complex issues. And Africa, as a conglomeration of 54 countries, for it to actualize these issues, it has to come together. So from the Organization of African Unity up to the late 90s when we evolved with African Union and the other institutions that are in place, multilateralism is not just about does it work for Africa. It's a way, it's a path, it's a platform to help Africa solve its issues. So yes, it's working for our continent.
Yeah. And then in terms of like your institutions such as like the AU and some RECs, right?
Yeah.
How have they been faring in that aspect, right? Are they are the member institute are they representing Africa well?
Yeah, so from the time presidents like the late Nkwame Nkrumah was championing the other leaders for Africa to come together, you know, when you read history, you hear his voice about Africa must be one, Africa must have one currency, Africa must have one government. You can see that voice today, that Africa economies must come together so that they are in a better position to negotiate on what they need. And I think we have seen that through time, the African heads of state and Africa governments, even as they sat in Addis Ababa to speak about the Africa we want, the Africa 2063, that agenda. I think, and you look at it, is what our continent and our people need. It's what must work for Africa to catch up with the rest of the world, especially the global north. And so the Africa Union, with its agenda cascaded down to the regional economic blocks, when you go to ECOWAS, you can see people moving from one country to the other with one passport. You can see people trading, and it's easier to move When you go to SADC, you can see those conversations of Southern Africa countries. When you come to the ESC and you go to the north, I think Africa Union and the regional economic blocs, there is a lot to be done, but I think the steps that they have taken are the right steps. Yeah, and so it's moving from what's more on paper, what's more spoken, whether it's in Addis or in Arusha or in Lusaka, to action, more action, so that we actualize that integrated Africa.
Yeah. So you work for the Africa Development Bank, which is a multilateral institution or organization, if you will, right? For those who don't know, what is the Africa Development Bank? What do you do? What does it do?
Yeah. So thank you, Silindile, for that, and I'm honored to work for the Africa Development Bank Group. In 1964, the Africa governments established the Africa Development Bank, which is the Africa premier financial institution. And its mandate is to support the regional member countries. These are 54 African countries, to actualize socioeconomic growth and reduce poverty. So the Africa Development Bank, headquartered in Côte d'Ivoire, in Abidjan, with that mandate of supporting the Africa countries, is constituted of a membership, what we call regional countries, this is Africa countries, and non-regional countries, which are 27 of them, non-regional countries. And it's headed by a president who is always elected by all these 81 member countries. And many notable platforms, magazines, and institutions have called him the Africa Optimist in Chief, the 8th president, who is our boss, President Dr. Akinwumi Addo Adesina, who, when he was elected in 2015, put forth his vision. And the vision was crafted in 5 operational areas. This is that Africa must light and power itself. Most parts of our continent are still in the dark. Number 2, that Africa must feed itself. That whatever Africa does with its agriculture will affect our dinner tables on the continent, together with our dinner tables where we are here in Europe, in the global north. Number 3 is that Africa must industrialize. Number 4, that Africa must integrate. You know, you as a South African, I don't know how many visas you need to move around. And then the last one is improving the quality of life. So these are the 5 operational areas of the Africa Development Bank. And therefore, Africa Development Bank mobilizes resources from all these member countries and then channels it to the African countries on roads, on water, on health and sanitation, on education, and the other key elements.
Yeah. So in terms of like tangible projects that the bank has been implementing to meet these objectives that you say your president has, right? Or the president of the FDB has. What is happening at the continental level?
I think when you ask me that, I will reset to the default setting of what I'm part of at the Africa Development Bank, you know, the women agenda, affirmative finance action for women in Africa, which, you know, we call a president's baby. This is an ambitious project, a 5 billion project, to get money into the hands of women SMEs. We know that women or SMEs in Africa are where jobs are created, where there is huge and substantive contribution to the GDP. And so the Africa Development Bank has caucused money together from the G7 countries. And for the last 1 year, $800 million has been channeled into the hands of women. This is through financial institutions, and this is also through women enablers. These are cooperatives, foundations, and governmental institutions. So you can go to Equity Bank in Kenya, or you can go to Robank in DRC, or you can go to Atijiriwafa in the north, or you can go to FSMB bank, a woman SME, and they can access money. They can access capacity building and technical assistance. It doesn't just stop there. You go to Kotoka Airport in Ghana and you see the new terminals, and that is Africa Development Bank, right? And you go to many roads. Currently, we have the huge Inga Dam project in DRC and the neighboring countries. Or you go to Thika Road in Kenya, you can be able to see the Africa Development Bank. Recently, the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, which is a critical infrastructure to integrate Africa, just got $11 million to establish its secretariat. And I think that is the backbone of the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. Once the secretariat is established, then it can continue to actualize. We are just coming from the backbone of COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and the president's commitment towards AFDB mobilizing $25 billion towards projects on the continent on climate adaptation. And so you can go on, and you can be able to see the Africa Development Bank in every country, in every sector, trying to push the agenda to have Africa countries move to the next level.
Yeah. No, that seems like great work that you are championing, and I think I'm especially excited because you're looking at issues affecting women, right? Or basically empowering women to also play or be at the center of economic development, right? With in their context. For you, right, having working in this space, what do you think are the similarities and differences between European and African institutions when it comes to multilateralism?
So I think I'll approach it this way. For a long time, Africa has been viewed from the lenses of aid, help. It's been a ground for humanitarian assistance. But for a long time, the global north, Europe, has been viewed as a platform for investments. And so when you are viewed from a humanitarian perspective, and you are viewed from an investment perspective, the issue of return on investment and the issue of just assistance are two different perspectives. And that has made, of course, many years of civilization in Europe to progress. And even when you look at the Asian tigers, from those lenses. And so private sector investments and multilateral investments. But for Africa, for a long time, it was aid, helping people who are hungry and all that. But I think looking at the work that Africa Development Bank is doing and looking at the Africa Union Agenda 2063, now it's a period where Africa is ready for investments. And therefore, as we move to the table with, for example, Europe on Global Gateway, or as we move on Build Back Better with the United States, or road and rail belt with China, it's about investments. It's Africa beyond aid. So Africa beyond aid is what will put us on the same table of negotiation with Europe or with the European Union, so that as they come to Africa, we are saying we are ready for investment, so that we ask, what is the return on investment? So as you push these amounts of money for road, we are looking at public-private partnerships and such related infrastructure. If it's money, it's blended finance. So this is what Africa governments are putting in. This is what Europe is putting in, or this is what Africa Development Bank is putting in. These are policies that Africa Union is pushing. This is what the regional economic blocs are doing. That whole ecosystem now is what has been lacking. But I think the multilateralism architecture now is addressing that.
Yeah. So Bernard, I mean, still on that in a
Yeah.
way, we are here in Europe and we are discussing EU and Africa relations,
Yeah.
right? As an African, as a young African person, what's your take on, what's your reflection, right? Because one of the things that we've been discussing in class is that, you know, EU has an agenda for Africa.
Yeah.
The US has an agenda for Africa. China has an agenda for Africa. What is the agenda for Africa for the world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the question now is we have 3 strategic agenda for Africa. And so as the continent, from its leadership, the political leadership, is to stay back and ask ourselves, what's our strength of negotiating through that agenda? If it's the global gateway, what do we have? And what is Europe bringing on the table so that we actualize win-win situations? Because my reflections are anchored again on what I said previously. That because of years of Africa being viewed as a humanitarian ground, sometimes we have gone on the table not in a strong way, not with clarity. And therefore, to me, I would sum it like this. We need to frame the issues right. When we frame the issues right, we go to the table united as a continent. We shouldn't be going as small countries. Yes, we can continue with bilateral engagements, but we should go to the table as one. If it's the issues of climate change, we should go with the Africa agenda, not with Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, Malawi agendas that are split. So we need this convergence because the global gateway is coming to Africa as European Union. It's not coming as Italy or France or Portugal. No, it's coming as European Union. And when you look at China with its vast population, it's a big economy, or the US, it's a big economy. So we need to come together as Africa so that we have strength. And then we use our resources, whether it's the young people, because we are a young continent. We leverage on our strength. We have 65% of arable land. We leverage on that. We have these minerals. We leverage on that. So we list our strength so that, and then our challenges, we turn them into opportunities. Let us not use our challenges as begging platforms. We use our challenges as opportunities for Europe to invest into us.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of challenges, maybe I guess also what I want to ask you is, in terms of making multilateralism work for us, right? What are the challenges that, like working in this space, right? What are the challenges that you think we should be paying attention to, right? That may emerge or that are emerging, that may hinder effective partnerships between different multilateral organizations.
I think what comes to my mind is raw nationalism. When we leave Abidjan or we leave Addis Ababa, Abidjan because of AFDB or Addis Ababa because of Africa Union, we go back to our small cocoons and become too selfish. Right? So when we are talking about visa index, for example, that Africa, we need to open our borders for Silindile to move easily, these boundaries that are there. We agree on a framework, but when we go to our countries, we do not align those policies on the global policies or continental policies that we have agreed at the Africa Union. So raw nationalism. And then our leaders, we need to continue consolidating our vision for the people. That when we make the Africa Free Continental Trade Area work, it is working for the small man, small woman at the bottom. But if we delay in signing the protocols as Africa presidents, African ministers, because we do not want this country to move to our country and all that, we are delaying that small man, small woman to prosper, right? And then we need to trust our institutions. And trusting our institutions starts with strengthening our institutions in our countries. When we strengthen our judiciary, our legislature, and our executive in our countries, it escalates to strengthening our regional economic blocs, institutions. That escalates to strengthening our continental institutions like Africa Union, Africa Development Bank. And then now, the global north trusts our institutions. And then we start to invest back home. So I think for multilateralism works, it starts in our countries as we escalate up.
Yeah. And then in terms of coming up with, sometimes I think we tend to look outwards for solutions, right? In looking inward, what do you think would be, how do we even start thinking about African solutions for African problems? Is there any move towards that? Are we seeing any direction towards that?
Yeah, the thing is, I'm wearing a shoe now. It's only my toe that knows where that shoe is pinching. The Africa story, the Africa challenges, the Africa opportunities, it's us as Africans who understand it. And so for multilateralism, first we need to tell our story ourselves. And when we tell our story ourselves with that clarity, and then the world will be able to have a clear picture of what the continent is. So we should not let the world to tell the Africa story. Number two is our countries. We must let the young people of our continent to reimagine their continent. So in as much as we leverage on the experience of our seniors, the seniors must leverage on the innovation and the energy and the agility and the excitement of the young people. And that now retools and reimagines our continent.
I like that you brought young people.
Yeah.
You are a young person yourself.
Yeah.
And you're working in multilateralism space, you're working at the African Development Bank.
Yeah.
What is the role of young people in shaping the Africa that we want to see? Where can young people start, plugging in? Doing the work?
I've been in this world for 34 years, right? And it's a big honor for us to be at the Africa Development Bank as a young people and being on the front row to see the issues of development. Young people in Africa is the opportunity Africa has for the world. Because Africa is the youngest continent. In 2050, we will be nearly 1 billion young people from the continent. Currently, we are half that. So, Africa leadership, the Africa Union, the Africa Development Bank must continue to invite young people in its governance bureaucracy, in its governance architecture. Because the energy of young people, the ability and the acumen that they have is what is needed to the Africa we want. Because if young people are let to be out there, that bulge, 10 to 12 million coming from our various institutions to the job market, they become restless. And when young people become restless, it starts to become chaotic. So we must be bold enough and visionary leaders. It's President Adesina who says visionary leaders cannot assume young people. Visionary leaders must know that young people are leaders of today. Today, not tomorrow, because tomorrow they'll be old.
Yes.
Yeah.
100% agree.
Yeah.
I always wonder why they say, yeah, the leaders for tomorrow. I'm like, I'm living today, right?
Yeah.
But I think sometimes when we talk about, the role of young people, I think sometimes we forget that sometimes some of these spaces seem unattainable for young people. You are a young person, and I think your story is a story of it's an inspirational story, and we won't get into that. But as someone who's come from a village in the African, in Kenya, right? Growing up, I don't think you saw yourself where you are right now, right? Maybe there was something in you that said, I will be where I am, but I don't think sort of like the vision itself was clear, right? What do you say to young people who might be listening to this? Because I think sometimes when we see people in leadership roles, it seems easy to say, you can do it. You are the future. You are the leader for tomorrow. This is what you should be doing. But most of the time, 3/4 of the people that we are speaking about don't even have access to the resources, don't even have the means to get to where we want them to get to. What is your reflection on that? What do you have to say to young people who are listening to you right now?
Yes. That is profound and that is deep. Many young people are so deep in poverty, some disillusioned and hopeless. But they are realities of life. There is no shortcut in life. So that must be very clear. That in this life, we all must work hard, we all must work smart. However, the challenges that we are in today must inspire us. Because if the challenges make us to lose hope, we become just walking corpses. So the poverty that young people listening to us is in, the missing out of a meal, going to bed hungry. My grandmother used to tell me that we have not got it today, but the sun has set. Inshallah, tomorrow the sun will rise and we will try again. So that challenge that you have today as you go to sleep must inspire you that tomorrow you will rise and try again. And when you try one more time, that is what makes you to move to your true north. And so young people, as they wake up and go through various challenges, and as they go to school with the opportunity that they have, or as they start a small business, that being deliberate, being intentional, is what pushes them to the right directions. And they must not shy away to walking to Silindile or walking to whoever they admire and ask them that fundamental question. That I admire you, where you have. What did you do to be where you are? Because once you ask that question, even if it's a teacher or a policewoman or an administrator, they share their story. They will tell you the mistakes they did. They'll tell you the best practices they followed. You will not repeat the mistakes. That means your track may be faster. So the young people must not shy away to knock at the doors and to ask the right questions. But as they ask the right questions, they must also learn to keep quiet and listen. The challenge today is that young people do not listen. They want to be in the room and they are speaking and speaking and speaking. And when you speak a lot, you don't listen to the advice. But also when you are listening, when you're quiet, you hear the inner voice. I'm a Christian and I trust that there is some power called God. Because when you keep quiet, you may hear that voice and it can also guide you. So the totality of this is that Africa has opportunities for her young people.
Yeah. And I think the last question that I'm going to ask you is, in terms, because you touched on a lot about how, we've been receiving aid, right? And now we need to shift towards investment, right? At the same time, African countries have also been receiving loans from your organizations like the IMF, right? What is your take on that? Because some people say these loans are actually entrapping African countries into a cycle of being indebted to these institutions, right? And which is also affecting effective leadership and governance in a way. So where is the balance? What's your reflection on this, and what would be the best way to approach such situations?
So loans are not bad.
Yeah.
Silindile.
Yes, and I'm asking you because you are from the FTV.
Loans are not bad.
Yeah.
But what are you taking the loan for? Are you taking the loan to pay people's salaries? Are you taking the loan to buy flowers and to buy tea? Or are you taking a loan to invest in a road, to invest in agriculture, to develop a dam, or to invest in a hospital? So what we do at the Africa Development Bank Group, right, is working with governments or working with private sector so that first we understand their financial situation, right? And we even capacity build the whole public finance management space of a country, or if it's a private sector, the whole financial ecosystem. And then we design together projects, investment opportunities that pull those countries to the next level. And that whole space is transparent and it's accountable, so that the loan is not a burden to a country or to a private entity, but it's an opportunity for a country or a private sector to fast track. Where we go wrong sometimes is because of weak governance, infrastructure, whether it's in a country or in private sector, and that makes us to make decisions around loan portfolios become a burden for a country. And that is where there is a cry that you hear this country, it went for an expensive commercial loan instead of coming to the Africa Development Bank, their institution, where they can work together and be able to get concessional developmental loans, right? Cognizant of the physical and monetary situation of that country. So Africa countries must work with their institutions, Africa Union, Africa Development Bank, and work with, global multilaterals, and be able to consolidate their financial ecosystems so that their loans or their debts can be able to enable them have investments that support them to where they want to go. So the thing is, today if I give you a loan, yes, that loan can be able to destroy you or build you, but it depends on how I gave you that loan, the amount, the tenure, the pricing, the purpose of that loan. And that is why we encourage our African countries to consolidate their debt through their own institutions like the Africa Development Bank.
Cool. In closing, you've been here in Europe for the past 3 months. Hopefully learning, expanding your knowledge on a new consuming new information from the different experts that we've been engaging with, as well as your colleagues, right? What are the key things that you'll take away with you from your time here?
No, thank you, Silindile, for the question. And even first, I would thank the European Union through the European University Institute for the opportunity to be among the Young Africa Leaders Program. We have so many young leaders on the continent, but being part of the 25 that joined, it's a big honor. Number two, of course, is to thank my employer, the Africa Development Bank, for allowing me for 3 months to work remotely from Florence, as I consolidate my leadership acumen through this program. And it's been great to reflect the journey, the history of Europe with Africa. It's been great to reflect on the current strategies and approach of Europe to Africa. and to look at the complexities and sometimes the ambiguity of the challenges facing the world today from the lens of European Union and the partnerships through its executive arm, which is the European Commission, and why it's important as a young leader to dispel some of the myths that have been there and to reimagine the new conversations of transparency between the Africa Union and European Union, and to look at the win-win opportunities therein and how European Union together with the African Union or Europe together with Africa wants to solve the complex issues like climate change, complex issues of food, complex issues of finance going into the future, and how we as young leaders can be able to go back and influence in our spaces of jurisdiction these conversations and ensure that we have a healthy multilateralism, even when the whole world is crying that multilateralism is going low and down every day. It is in our hands, because Africa beyond what it is today is in our hands as young people. We are the ones who will fast track Africa 2063. And so the last 3 months has been an honor to listen to global leaders and world experts on various fields, from human rights, migration, climate, governance, and sustainability here at the European University Institute at the School of Transnational Governance. And I can only look forward to reflecting with my colleagues at the Africa Development Bank and even the politics around the finances that come to the continent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Benard.
Thank you so very much.
We can talk forever.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time and for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
I wish you the best,
Thank you
and
so
I
very
look forward
much.
to seeing what unfolds after the fellowship.
Thank you. Grazie. Merci. Asante sana.
Yeah.